Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a really huge moment in human history. I mean, truly transformative. We're talking about that massive shift, from hunter-gatherers moving around all the time to settling down, farming, agriculture. It was such a pivotal point. It reshaped, well, everything societies, the environment, and maybe surprisingly, it even changed our genes.
Yeah, and for ages, scientists have been debating, well, how exactly did this happen across Europe? Was it mostly about ideas spreading? Like, did hunter-gatherers just learn farming from neighbors, cultural diffusion, they call it? Or was it more about people, actual groups of people migrating, mixing in, maybe replacing populations? That's the demic diffusion idea. People moving, that's been the big question for a long time. So our mission here in this deep dive is to unpack some really fascinating new research, stuff that gives us a much clearer, more detailed answer. We're looking at a study from the University of Geneva, working with folks at Freiburg and Mainz, published in Science Advances. It's quite something. And the headline finding, kind of the big reveal up front.
It wasn't really a story of conflict or one group just wiping out the other. No, it seems it was much more about, well, long-term coexistence, living side by side and gradually, slowly interbreeding over time. Two different ways of life kind of merging.
That's absolutely right. As you said, the debate really did boil down to those two main ideas for a long time. Was it culture spreading, or was it people moving and mixing? That was the core of it for the Neolithic transition in Europe.
So what finally tipped the balance? For years it was back and forth. What evidence really made the case for migration and this mixing, this admixture?
Well, it was really a powerful combination of things. Archaeology played a part, definitely. Finding sites where you could see artifacts from both hunter-gatherers and early farmers, sometimes in close proximity,
Right.
suggesting they coexisted somehow.
Okay, so physical evidence on the ground.
Exactly. But the real game changer was ancient DNA, paleogenomics. This study looked at genetic data from 67 prehistoric individuals, really well-preserved remains. And crucially, they came from 17 different archaeological sites right along the path farmers are thought to have taken into Europe, the Danube route.
So tracing the path genetically.
Precisely. And when they combined that ancient genetic data with the archaeological picture, it became much clearer. It confirmed population migration and admixture were major factors. Like the study says, it was not characterized by violent confrontation or complete replacement, but rather by prolonged coexistence with increasing levels of interbreeding. Wow, that really does paint a different picture.
It does. Much more complex, much more nuanced than just conquest.
Okay, but how? How do scientists figure this out with such, seeming precision, reconstructing interactions from thousands of years ago? What tools are we talking about?
Yeah, the methodology is really quite innovative. They use sophisticated computer simulations, specifically a modified version of a simulation tool called Splash E3. It's designed to model things happening across space and time.
So like building a virtual ancient Europe.
Kind of, yeah, but very complex one. These models weren't simple. They factored in geography where the sites were, biological details like estimated population sizes, who fast people reproduced, migration patterns, all of that.
And critically, they also included variables for how the groups might have interacted, like what was the rate of genetic mixing, the admixture, was there competition?
Right, trying to model the social dynamics too.
Exactly. So they ran literally thousands of genetic scenarios, each one with slightly different settings for these parameters. Then they compared the results of all these simulations to the actual genetic data they got from those 67 ancient individuals.
So which simulation best matched the real-world genetics?
Precisely. Using advanced statistical methods, they could figure out which set of parameters, which scenario was the most likely explanation for the genetic patterns they observed in the bones. And the genetic data they used was top-notch. These things called neutralomes.
Neutralomes?
Yeah, basically specific regions of the genome that are thought to be neutral, meaning they don't code for traits that natural selection would strongly act on. This gives a cleaner signal about population history, who mixed with whom, who moved where, without the noise of selection favoring certain genes. Really helps get accurate demographic inferences.
That is clever. Okay, so the models pointed to this gradual mixing. Let's get into that. How did it actually unfold? Was it immediate? Did it change over time?
Yeah, this is maybe the core finding. The mixing, the gene flow from hunter-gatherers into the farmer populations, it was initially rare but increased locally over time. So at each place the farmers expanded to, along that route towards northwest Europe, the mixing started slow but picked up pace.
Over how long?
The models estimate this increase in the admixture rate happened over about 70 generations on average.
70 generations. How long is that in years?
Well, if you figure about 25 years per generation, that's roughly 1,750 years.
Wow. Okay, so definitely not a quick process. A millennium and 3/4 of gradual increase in mixing.
Exactly. So farmers arrive. There's maybe not much interaction initially, genetically speaking, but over centuries, that changes locally.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like they showed up and immediately started families together widely. It took time.
Right. And another really important point here is the difference between the rate of admixture and the final proportion of ancestry.
Okay, explain that difference.
So the estimated admixture rate itself was actually quite low. It started near zero when farmers first arrived in an area, and then increased gradually, maybe up to around 5%, perhaps peaking at 10% much later in some phases. Pretty low rates.
Okay, 5 or 10% doesn't sound like a lot per generation.
It doesn't, but, and this is key, even a small, consistent admixture rate like that happening generation after generation as the farmer population grows and expands, it can add up. It leads to a much larger proportion of hunter-gatherer ancestry in the farmer gene pool down the line. It's the cumulative effect of migration, population growth, and these interactions over that long time.
Right, right. So a little bit added, each generation snowballs over 1,700 years.
Precisely. And this idea, this delayed admixture scenario, it actually fits quite well with archaeological ideas that have been around for a while. Concepts like the secondary Neolithic, where some hunter-gatherer groups seem to have adopted farming practices much later, assimilating gradually. The genetics seem to back up that kind of picture.
Fascinating. So the genetics and archaeology are telling a similar story there. Okay, so even with this gradual integration, farmers did expand successfully. What advantages did they have? The study must shed some light on that.
It does. Two key things came out of the demographic modeling. First, population size. The estimated effective population size, sort of the breeding population of the early farmers, was roughly 5 times larger than the local hunter-gatherers.
5 times larger. That's a significant difference.
It is. More people means more demographic momentum, more resilience.
Makes sense. What was the second thing?
The second thing was about how they moved. The models highlighted something called long-distance dispersals, or LDDs.
Okay, long jumps.
Yeah, basically. While most migration was probably step-by-step, short hops into new territory, the model suggests there was also a low level, maybe around 2%, of migrations that were much longer jumps, average around 800 kilometers.
Wow, 800 kilometers. That's a huge leap for that time period.
It is. And these rare long jumps seem to have been essential for the speed at which farming spread into Central Europe. When they ran simulations without these LDDs, they just couldn't replicate the genetic patterns seen in the ancient people.
So it wasn't just a slow wave, it was more like leapfrogging.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. A leapfrog colonization model. Most movement is gradual diffusion, but these occasional long leaps really sped things up.
That paints a really dynamic picture. Small ripples mostly, but occasional big splashes driving the expansion forward. So given this long coexistence and the gradual mixing, what about friction between the groups? Competition for land, for resources, was it a constant struggle?
Well, this is another area where the findings were maybe a bit surprising. The study actually estimated a low competition rate between hunter-gatherers and farmers, around 20%.
Only 20%. What does that imply?
It suggests they weren't constantly fighting over the exact same resources or territories. They often occupied partially overlapping niches.
So they managed to coexist without intense rivalry for the most part.
That seems to be the implication. Perhaps the early farmers focused on specific types of land suitable for their crops, maybe areas less used by hunter-gatherers, or maybe environmental conditions, affecting crop yields, meant the pressure wasn't always intense. Whatever the reason, this low level of competition seems crucial. It's likely what allowed for that long cohabitation period that genetics point to. It wasn't necessarily about dominance, but finding ways to exist in the same landscape, at least for a very long time.
That low competition angle really does shift the narrative away from automatic conflict. So bringing this all together, this study paints a really rich, complex picture. But like any study, it can't answer everything, right? Are there still unknowns, limitations, areas for future work?
Oh, absolutely. The researchers are quite clear about the limitations. Science is always iterative.
Yeah.
For instance, while they found this general pattern of delayed admixture increasing over time, the study did not reveal spatial variability in that rate along the route.
Meaning they couldn't tell if the mixing happened faster or slower in, say, the Balkans versus Central Europe.
Exactly. They suggest their data set, while amazing, might still be a bit too sparse spatially to reliably detect those kinds of geographical differences. There's also a tricky issue because genome age and distance from Anatolia are correlated. Oldest farmer samples tend to be closer to the origin point. It makes it hard to separate time effects from location effects perfectly.
Okay, that makes sense. A challenge with the data itself.
Right. And also, the models themselves involve some simplifications, as all models do. They use, for example, uniform carrying capacities and migration rates across the simulated landscape and time.
But in reality, environments varied, populations probably fluctuated.
Precisely. We know farmer populations likely went through booms and busts. Different environments would support different numbers of people. The models aim for the big picture, the general trend over millennia, rather than capturing every specific short-term pulse of migration or admixture that might have occurred locally.
Got it. So it's a powerful model, but it smooths out some of the potential bumps along the road.
You could say that. But despite those caveats, the researchers emphasize that this combination, ancient genetics plus sophisticated modeling, it really provides a foundational platform. It's a base upon which future research can build, adding more data, refining the models, and getting an even clearer picture of these ancient dynamics.
Absolutely. What a fascinating journey we've been on in this deep dive. We've really seen how that Neolithic transition, that shift to farming in Europe was just so much more intricate than, a simple story of replacement. It wasn't a quick takeover. It was this prolonged dance of coexistence, interaction, and very gradual genetic exchange playing out over, well, centuries and centuries.
It really underscores the power of bringing different lines of evidence together, doesn't it? The archaeology, the cutting-edge ancient DNA analysis, and these incredibly complex computer simulations. It's that synthesis that lets us reconstruct these deep historical processes with a level of detail that just wasn't possible before, moving past assumptions to actually estimate what happened demographically.
Truly remarkable. So maybe a final thought for you, our listeners, to ponder as we wrap up. What does this detailed picture of gradual adaptation and integration tell us? Thinking about how these ancient populations with very different lifestyles managed to coexist and slowly blend over such a long period. How might this dynamic, this story of coexistence and eventual integration resonate with or maybe even challenge how we think about interactions between different groups and cultures in our own world today? Something to think about.